He's on my tail again to leave the lab and go into sales.
Well, why not? There's more money in the sales department.
I know, look, Gene, we've been all through that before.
But, David, we could use the extra money.
I'm an engineer, not a salesman.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for our show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Joshua Motta, who is the CEO of Coalition, a cyber insurance and security startup that helps businesses manage and mitigate cyber risk. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me.
So, Joshua, at the early age of 14, you began working at Microsoft. I'm curious as to in what capacity. And I guess you were one of the youngest employees at Microsoft at that time. And you also, I guess, apparently did a stint in a cyber program within the CIA when you're still a student at the University of Chicago. Can you just share whatever you can?
Yeah, absolutely. As you can tell, I've always been fascinated by computers. So I started a business. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life, starting at a young age, which I'm sure through an ample amount of luck got me recognized by Microsoft. And one thing led to another. I joined their student intern program. And well, I think I accepted at the age of 14. I may have technically turned 15 by the time I'd started there. So it was a really wonderful experience as a software engineer at a really interesting time in the development of technology. Of course, it was 1999, which some may remember as sort of the height of what would ultimately become the dot-com bubble. But it was a wonderful learning experience. And of course, success begets success. So that ultimately, after a number of other positions, led to working for the Central Intelligence Agency during my time at the University of Chicago, as you mentioned. So focused on a number of things, but obviously cyber was becoming very much a topic even at that point in time. And this was right after 9/11.
And are you able to share in terms of the kind of work that you were doing, whether it was around, let's say, encryption or just trying to understand what exactly you were getting involved within that cyber program?
Yeah, sure. I can go into some details. I mean, I think it was really considering cyber as a offensive tool used by adversaries of the United States. And so we were focused on understanding what those capabilities were and of course, defending the country from a national security perspective.
And I'm just curious, although, of course, DARPA and many of the DoD enterprise have focused on cybersecurity for many decades, with the onset of the internet, things must have been changing fairly dramatically at that point when you were involved, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think certainly by this point in time, both the United States and our allies, and for that matter, adversaries of the United States and our allies, had realized that there was really a fourth theater of operation outside of the traditional land, sea, and air that the military was used to defending, and that was the cyber domain. And so, we were starting to see certainly nation state activity in cyberspace that was certainly advancing their own national goals. So it was very much a nascent time for it. It's developed considerably since. I've left, but yeah, we were there at the beginning.
Well, this is actually very, very important because as we continue to unfold your story, your journey, that's kind of that 20 some odd years of what you've been exposed to. You've also been very much at the forefront in terms of developing how this market will really become, as well as how to actually support it properly. So to that end, I know that you eventually went into private equity and hedge fund as well as investment banking. But I think one of the key transitions that you made was moving from finance into a startup called Cloudflare, which now is being traded on the NYSE. Can you talk about that journey portion and why you decided to shift from Wall Street to Cloudflare?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned, I've really always been an entrepreneur, and in some respects, computers they were the key to becoming an entrepreneur. Right? Not many people are willing to give a lease to a 14-year-old, and so the anonymity of the internet helped quite a bit in operating a business. In fact, most of our customers didn't realize that we were teenagers. So I've always had a passion for technology, and even though I've been in different positions, whether in the government or in the financial services, I've always focused on the technology aspect. So while I was at Goldman Sachs, I was in their technology investment banking team. And then in terms of joining Cloudflare, that was a way to get back to doing what I love to do, which was building businesses. And so I had the good fortune to meet the founders of Cloudflare very early on in that journey. And it was the mission of the company at the time, which it still is today, was to build a better internet. And that was absolutely a mission I could get behind. And to our good fortune, the company's done extremely well, which I think can only mean that the internet has done very well, or we've at least succeeded in building a partially better internet. There's certainly a lot more work to go, and Cloudflare is well on the way to doing that at scale.
Now, Cloudflare, if I recall, I think started somewhat, I think was it 2006 or 2007? So going back to your earlier story of doing some of your work at Microsoft and certainly at the cyber program with the CIA.
Yeah.
So much had changed even from, let's say, 1999 to 2006 to 2007. So during your tenure at Cloudflare, what was kind of the change in landscape that you were seeing, and how did the product evolve over time to mitigate some of the risks that were arising?
Yeah, so Cloudflare was founded in 2009 and really kind of took off the ground in 2010. But the story is consistent, which is I think we had moved from sort of nation state level capabilities, if you will, in cyberspace to it was becoming a widespread criminal effort. So the sophistication, the complexity to launch attacks or to achieve some sort of criminal outcome, it had only gotten easier and easier and easier. The cost, the organization's dependency on technology was growing, while at the same time, the criminal's ability to use technology against organizations was also growing. So, we very much were sort of, I'd say in that time period, at the cusp of it, really an explosion of economically motivated cybercrime as opposed to, nation state or state-oriented operations, which that trend has only continued to grow at a significant clip since then. And, I would argue that today we are more dependent on technology than we ever have been in human history. And as a result, like, criminals are in some respects more empowered and have more control to victimize businesses than they ever have.
Yeah, we were just speaking with the former deputy director of the UK Cyber Center. And Mr. Yap was talking about the fact that a lot of these criminal rings since that time of, let's say, 2010 to now have gotten so sophisticated that they're effectively running it as very much like a multinational business with business units and focus and domain expertise and specializations, and of course AI and some of these things that's actually lowering the cost structure of doing their business, which is bad business.
That's right, and even worse,
kind of, it kind of brings us to the topic at hand, which is you started a startup called Coalition. Because again, we're seeing a very much a pattern throughout your life and your career in terms of where things are going.
Right.
How did Coalition come about when you left Cloudflare back in 2017? What were you seeing, and why did you feel that this was the kind of product that was needed at this point?
Yeah, I sort of joke that the idea came to me overnight after thinking about it for 25 years. And so it quite literally was the culmination of everything I'd done. And, for better or for worse, it took me that long to realize that cybersecurity really isn't a technology problem. It's a risk management problem. And if you think about it as a risk management problem, there's really three things that an organization can do. They can accept the risk, whether knowingly or, unfortunately in this case, more often than not, unknowingly. They can mitigate that risk, and of course, technology can play a role. Hiring the right folks, implementing controls and protective actions. But I believe historically we thought that risk mitigation was sort of a linear reduction to zero. Whereas in reality, it looks more like a diminishing returns chart, right? As you add more technology, you hire more people, you spend more money, you get less and less marginal benefit up until the point at which you just tail out. You could have an infinite budget, and there's still the risk that something bad could happen to your organization or technology could simply fail. And that's where the third component is risk transfer. You can't eliminate technological risk, you can't eliminate cyber risk, but you can eliminate the cost of it by transferring it to a third party. And so Coalition was really the opportunity to build a business that did all of those things. We could help customers understand their risk so that they could determine how much to accept. We could help them mitigate the risk. And so Coalition provides a significant amount of technology, data, and intelligence to our clients to proactively help them reduce their risk. And of course, that's because we have an incentive to do so, because we're allowing them to transfer their risk to us. And so we have a natural financial interest to prevent them from having a loss, because if they do, and like an insurance company, and of course today Coalition is one of the largest cyber insurance companies in the United States, we have an active financial interest to do so. So that was a little bit about the genesis of it. And as you pointed out, it was certainly a culmination of really everything I've done throughout my career. Like, what would happen if we combined a financial service, insurance, with a technology company and really an intelligence and data collection mentality?
We were, I think, had another cyber risk insurance startup on the show before, and I think the way he had described it, or maybe it was not on the show, but one of the meetings we had, and he was explaining that it felt very much like he was running two different companies. Where there's a core kind of financial services insurance product and platform, but then you have this other component that's really the core cybersecurity aspect and the continuous real-time assessment.
Right.
Now, you're in a very unique position where you are able to blend your financial background plus your software and cybersecurity background. So it's in many ways, it's actually holistic and unified. So I want to kind of ask you in terms of both from what's been attributed to the market leadership and what's been kind of that secret IP as well as a process trade secret to an extent that you can actually share publicly to some extent, that has really kind of lifted you from the rest of the crowd, because insurtech and certainly cyber risk insurance category is starting to kind of balloon at this point.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think to some degree our success has been that we have been able to blend those two things together seamlessly. I've always believed that insurance companies should be technology companies, right? If you think about it, first principles at the core of the insurance industry is really two things: the flow of money and the flow of data. Money to pay premiums, money to pay out claims, data to assess the likelihood of that, to detect insurance fraud, to do any number of things. And those are really the same two elements at the core of the tech industry. And so in many respects, I think our success has been building one of the first insurance companies that is natively a technology company. And the importance of that is that we're defying what's expected of insurance, right? I've always said that the insurance industry suffers from a timing problem. Normally, most people who buy insurance only get value out of it after something bad happens. And as a result, most people don't have the most lovely relationship with their insurance company because it's always in a moment of stress. I've always thought this was short-sighted. I believe that insurance companies should deliver value to their clients even before something bad happens. And in fact, that should be precisely the point. How do they help them avoid that event from happening? Because of course, neither the client nor the insurance company wants to file a claim. And so I'd say that's really the thing that we've done better than anyone else. It's because we are a tech company, because we don't just collect data on you once a year, we're continuously underwriting you, right? The concept of underwriting once a year for cyber risk is archaic. And that we're then exposing that underwriting data back to you to help you engineer your risk, to help you improve your risk. That's really what's been different. And we're doing so in a way in which we don't charge for that, right? You still pay for insurance just like you always did. And you get the software, you get this data at no incremental cost. And of course, again, that's because we have an interest to do that. The better we are at helping you prevent a claim or containing it when it happens, the better we do as an insurance company. And that's played out. So if you look at Coalition versus the rest of the US cyber insurance market, I believe last year, according to the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, around 6.4% of cyber insurance policyholders filed a claim that was in excess of their deductible. Coalition customers in the same period, only less than 1.5% filed a claim in excess of their deductible. And so our customers file considerably fewer claims than the rest of the market, precisely because of these value-added services that we provide. And when you're a small business and you can't afford to invest in all of the latest cybersecurity tools, or you can't afford to become educated, to the extent that folks in our team who come out of, the National Security Agency, CIA, where I was at, or the private sector, we have an ability to provide this service to our customers at a considerably lower cost than they could ever do themselves. So it's really resonated. And on the back of that, today we have over 25,000 customers after, less than 3 years in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think, again, kind of following the pattern of your journey is this notion that as the internet and not just the usage, but of course the threat changes, and the pervasiveness and the impact not only to the state-to-state level, but the enterprise level, and eventually cascading down to SMBs and small businesses. And I think, just before Coalition started, really, a lot of the kind of the SaaS component that you're talking about, to some extent, we're providing more of a services or as kind of a SaaS model. And I think you guys were one of the first to actually start to transition that and introduce the liability transfer aspect in terms of, adding the insurance component to it. Whereas before, it was very much a pay service. And I think, what's beautiful about this kind of unifying approach is the levers kind of work together, right? Because, whenever you're selling a service as a SaaS or as an advisory, it feels very much like, gosh, it's a cost. Whereas I think the model that you guys have come up with is it's both a mitigation and it's a lowering and it's a transfer risk. And to that point, there's also kind of the bigger regulatory framework and some of the change that's happening, I think that's playing into this as well. So our research indicated that, I guess recently the Treasury Department, I think this was as of last month, warned that no one is allowed to transact with sanctioned entities. Mm-hmm. And also additionally, the Office of the Foreign Assets Control specifically called out victims of ransomware for possible sanction violations, kind of a first for the federal agency. And I wonder, to what extent are some of these regulatory and compliance advisories and changes driving companies to look to cyber insurance and specific Coalition?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think there's no doubt that the compliance changes, GDPR, the California Consumer Privacy Act, there's a number of legislation that are driving companies to become more aware of this risk. In seeking, again, risk transfer solutions to insure it. But with that said, there is a feedback loop here. The reason why, I believe that a greater reason why there's an interest in purchasing cyber insurance, and frankly, why there's a greater reason on the behalf of the government and regulators to focus organizations' minds on it, is that cybercrime is exploding. Bad things are happening to good companies every day. And while you may read about the extraordinary ones in the news, because of course, remember, the news by definition is rare and extraordinary, it's reached such an epidemic level that no one reports on the impacts to small businesses. Today, it is far more likely as a small business that you will experience ransomware, I believe, than a fire in your building. And yet almost every business has insurance that would cover a fire, but very few today have any coverage for ransomware. And that's a problem. And so where most large corporations either survive it on the basis of the fact that they can accept it, they have a large balance sheet, or they've purchased insurance, many small businesses don't. And it can be existential, right? And it can be irreversible damage. So there's certainly an interplay. Regulation is driving purchase interest. However, I'd say ultimately it's the explosion in cybercrime that's driving both purchase interest and some of the regulatory actions that you see the U.S. government taking.
And I'm sure there's a lot of statistics that are out there, but I think going back to your earlier comment about the fact that it's driven by economics, it's the economic gain that these parties are looking for. So if you look at, for example, North Korea, I mean, I think there's figures that indicate that a certain percentage of their GDP specifically comes from these types of cyber crimes, ransomware, and theft of bitcoins and cryptocurrency types. So very much there are real enterprises that are looking to profit off this. Now, one of the things that's somewhat of a misconception is that that certain companies are being targeted when in fact would you say that it's not so much being targeted as much as looking for those vulnerabilities and then taking advantage and exploiting those vulnerabilities?
Yeah. So the way I kind of outlined it is you have targets of choice and you have targets of opportunity. And certainly larger organizations, those that are strategically important, are targets of choice, right? There's, to your point, there's someone in North Korea that puts on a military uniform and their path to promotion is hacking that business. Meanwhile, the vast majority of businesses in this country are really targets of opportunity. They're not targeted because of who they are. They're targeted because of some technological decision they've made, a bad one, of course, a vulnerability that's visible on the public internet. And so simply put, what hackers are doing is literally scanning every single computer system on the internet, looking for that vulnerability. I'm going to call it a nail, like the nail that's sticking out above the surface. And that's because they have the hammer, which is the exploit. And so for our customers, when claims are being filed, they weren't targeted because of who they were. They were targeted because they made some sort of technological decision that enabled a hacker to, first of all, see it on the internet, and that was the pathway into their network. So, simply put, our approach is to help companies find those nails, not only during the underwriting process, but throughout the entire policy period, work with them to remove the nails, because if we can do that, we can dramatically lower the probability that that company is targeted in the first place. And that's important, because I would never claim that any of our customers are secure. I would never claim that any organization is secure. If you want to hack something, you will. However, if we can eliminate the chances or the probability that they're targeted in the first place, it doesn't matter whether they're 100% secure. So that's really the key that we found as we think about managing risks for organizations. It's doing everything possible to make yourself not an obvious target. You want to make yourself a hard target.
So speaking of nails, can you talk about maybe some of the kind of the big salient ones that really stand out in terms of most common cases, and the kinds of resolutions or remediations or mitigation factors that can be put in place to address that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the big nails really haven't changed, I'd say, for the past decade. As much as people in the technology industry want you to focus on all these new technology, AI and blockchain and whatever. The reality is that it's humans, it's email, right? It's people clicking on the wrong things, and I've not found anything that can correct the fallibility of humans as of yet. So that certainly continues to be a big one. Remote access to your corporate network that's visible on the internet. You're just inviting someone in, and unfortunately, as a result of kind of the pandemic and everyone working from home, remote access has exploded. Companies are turning on remote access to their corporate networks to let people get work done from home. And it accomplishes a business goal, but they don't realize that if it's not done correctly, and even worse, if you just put it on the internet, then you're going to have a lot of other people trying to log into your network that are not your employees and that you certainly do not want logging in. And so that is overwhelmingly the leading reason for ransomware that we see among our clients. It's that they've turned on some sort of remote access. The hacker was scanning for it, as I mentioned, they found it, and then they just either brute force their way in or credential stuffing, things of that nature. So between email and remote access, those are the overwhelming majority of reasons people get in. I'd say that a smaller one, but we still see, is they have some sort of unpatched software or some sort of software vulnerability. And in many cases, it's a known vulnerability. It's not a 0 day, as they would call it in the cybersecurity industry. It's something that's known. It's just the company never got around to patching it. So I'd say those three reasons are probably over 99% of cyber insurance claims.
Now, I want to explore just, we only have about a minute or so, but just a little bit more in terms of when you do, in fact, identify these vulnerabilities in terms of, opportunities that these potential hackers are looking to exploit. How do you work with some of these small businesses and SMBs in terms of trying to resolve some of these issues?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, in our case, and what's really differentiated us is we provide real-time alerting. We are the only cyber insurance company in the world that is scanning every single computer system on the planet. So we talk to over 8 billion devices on average, hundreds of times a month. And if you're a policyholder, it's 65,000 times per week. So we're collecting data at significant scale, like a technology company would. And when we find those nails, we immediately tell you. And by the way, sometimes those nails are things that indicate that you've already been breached. And imagine that your insurance company reaches out to you and tells you, you need to file a claim with us. Like, when has that ever happened before, right? So I think we may be one of the first insurance companies that's actually triggered claims under our own policy. But of course, the reason to do that is because the breach is never the point of failure. If we can detect that something has happened very quickly, we can contain that proverbial fire in your network to a single compartment versus letting it take down your entire business, which of course, from our perspective, means it's a less costly claim. The same, of course, for the company. So that's really what's differentiated us, is being able to take that information, provide it in near real time to our clients, and then give them access to a team of people. We call it a coalition security and instant response team that's, again, available at no cost, where if they have any questions or need any other guidance, they can reach out to our team and we'll help them, help walk them through the issue. And that's the other important thing, right? Because normally when you file an insurance claim, you don't really expect your insurance company to do anything other than give you a check. That's not the case for cyber insurance. When our clients come to us, the fire is still burning. And sadly, there is no 911 when it comes to cyber claims. So you can call them, but there's not a whole lot they can do. And so that's a capability that we've been able to build within Coalition, to where we don't just help you financially recover, we first help you operationally recover, which is, of course, what our clients want more than anything else.
Yeah, I think that's a really distinctive differentiator. I mean, this emergency response team effectively acts as a kind of a bolt-on IT/cybersecurity DevSecOps team for these businesses that typically wouldn't have the expertise nor the resources.
It's the bat phone. If you want the cyber bat phone, we have it.
Very interesting. All right, my last question for you is if you could kind of look back at your span of career thus far and think about maybe product or project failures and the type of lessons learned that you can share with others.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a couple of the things I've learned over time is that, first one is about aperture, right? It takes, if you're working towards a small goal, I found that I've spent as much time working towards a grand one. And so, I've really recognized that it's important as an entrepreneur and as the leader of a company to always have a grand vision and to always direct the company to work towards that grand vision, because no one's going to work any less hard or more hard because we wanted to solve a small problem versus a large one. So always orienting to picking the large problem has been a key lesson. I think the other one is that it's one thing to have a vision. And we certainly have a very clear vision as to how we believe cybersecurity and cyber insurance and whatnot should work. But that really has to be met with an ability to execute against that vision. And so there is a saying I've always loved, which was that vision without action is a dream, and action without vision is a nightmare. And I believe that's very much true in my past experiences. I mean, where things have gone wrong, sometimes it's that we had this wonderful vision, but we didn't execute against it. Or I'd say the more common one that I've personally experienced in being in tech companies and otherwise is doing lots of actions, but without any clear vision as to what we wanted to accomplish. So it's really kind of bringing those two things together, have a grand vision and, make sure that you have the ability to execute against it. That's half the battle, to be perfectly honest.
It is, and to that end, I think there was some sort of announcement about a recent executive hire, I think specifically as it pertains to on the product development side, if I recall.
Yeah, that's right. So we actually hired a new head of engineering. He was previously the general manager for Amazon Web Services CloudWatch and X-Ray products, and of course that's a $2 billion business for Amazon. So it was quite a coup to take him away from AWS and bring him on to lead our engineering efforts. And I think that again reinforces the fact that we're not just building an insurance company. We are very much building a deep technology business.
So with that, I've been joined by Joshua Motta, who is the CEO of Coalition. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks again for having me. Bye-bye.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.